Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. Today I'll share with you some gardening tips as we move into June. We head down to Walters, Oklahoma to visit a home vegetable garden. Then we come back here to the Botanic Garden to do some training and pruning on our espalier trees. Finally, Barbara Brown is here with a tasty recipe for lettuce and beans. As we head into the summer months, your garden is probably beginning to ramp up just like your summer activities. Now, while you probably figured out your vacation plans already and you've also probably thought about your pets, have you thought about your garden while you're away? The last thing you want to come home to after a relaxing vacation is to a dead garden. So you need to think about who's going to water your garden while you're away. Also, who's going to harvest your produce if you have a vegetable garden so that it doesn't go to waste. And finally, think about who might mow your lawn while you're away, especially for an extended period of time, as that can be a good giveaway that you're not at home. Now, regardless of whether you're leaving or not and you're thinking about watering, one thing that will help your watering situation is to mulch your garden. Now, typically in a landscape garden, we will use hardwood mulch, but for a vegetable garden, you might consider something that's going to break down a little bit faster, such as cotton burrs or straw. Regardless of which mulch you choose, that's going to help the evaporation out of that soil profile and maintain that moisture in there, reducing how often you have to water and less stress on your plants. Also, as we head into June, you want to think about fertilizing your warm season grasses. Typically, warm season grasses will benefit from 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet during those summer months. Now, keep in mind, you do not want to fertilize your cool season lawns as we head into those warmer months. Also, you may notice that the pesky June beetles will start to emerge out of your soil. And while they might be annoying, they're actually not doing much damage to your landscape at this point, as they're more interested in finding a mate. However, it is important to kind of note the volume of June beetles you're seeing, as that might be an indicator of how many pupae you're going to find in your soil profile a little bit later in July. Now, it's that pupa that is the most damaging to your landscape, as it's an aggressive turf grass root feeder. So it will do a lot of damage on your turf grass in July. And that's really when we're going to treat them. Also, as your strawberry plants quit producing later in June, you're going to want to thin your strawberry crowns to about a 12 to 24 inch spacing, and also side dress them with fertilizer. Finally, think about your trees. If you had winter wrap on your tree trunks, it's important to remove that wrap so that it doesn't harbor any insects or diseases as we go into the summer months. Here are a few more hort tips for the month of June. Today we are at a home garden just outside of Walters, Oklahoma in southwestern Oklahoma. And joining us is Andrea Ballard. And Andrea, your garden is beautiful. And I have to say, I think this was the year for cool season crops. What have you found?
I think you're right. They're a little bigger than they usually get, and everything looks really well, and they're growing really well.
So tell us a little bit about what all you have in the garden here.
Well, we've got green cabbage and broccoli and some red cabbage, some cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts, which is a first for me this year. I've never tried to grow Brussels sprouts, but they're doing well.
Yeah.
I've got onions and lettuce and beets and a salad mix, and then I've started my peppers and my tomatoes for the summer garden also already. So.
Yeah, so some of your cabbage and broccoli, it looks like you're doing in kind of segments here. Can you tell us a little bit about your planting method?
I tried the square foot gardening method this year, which is 1 plant per square foot. Seems a little crowded to me, so probably next year I'll spread it out maybe 1 per 2, just to give the plants a little bit more room. It seems to be working okay as far as size and everything, but I will move my cabbage to the outside row so it's not shaded over by the leaves of the bigger plants.
Yeah, the other ones kind of
took
crowd
over
them
there
out a little bit. It
Yeah.
looks like. So I mean, you've got, I mean, this broccoli, for instance, right here. It looks like it's ready to harvest, and some of your cabbage as well. Or?
Yes. In fact, probably tomorrow we'll be harvesting some of the bigger heads of broccoli. We've got some pretty good sized heads of cauliflower over there that need to come out, and then some of the heads of cabbage also need to come out, and we'll blanch those and freeze those and actually put those in the freezer to use all winter.
So a little bit about, I mean, a lot of times we think about gardening come April and May, but when did this go in the ground? I mean, tell us a little bit about all the prep and getting this cool season garden started.
Well, prep started in February. I did the first round with the tillers and turned the dirt in February. Late February, we pushed our organic cow fertilizer onto the garden, and then the 1st of March, I had a lady that had a tractor tiller, and she came and laid me some nice beds and tilled the fertilizer in, and so that was all ready. Most of the plants went in March 14th. The onions went in about a week before that because I got them a week before and they needed to get in the ground rather than stay out. So.
Yeah, it's about capturing that. Sometimes it's not so nice to get out in the garden, but that's really when you got to get these plants out there.
Yeah, and actually we were lucky, you know, weather after the big freeze in February, everything was, the weather was pretty nice to be out in March.
Right.
Then of course we had the late cold weather, but with cool season I wasn't worried about that
Yeah, that's
too
kind
much,
of prolonged, I think, and allowed those heads to develop more
to
with
get
the
bigger.
cooler temperatures.
And it's been cooler, and we've had a pretty wet March and April so far, so, and into May.
Yeah.
And I think it's fixing to get wetter.
So you've got your warm season out. Tell us
Yes.
a little bit. I noticed your tomatoes behind you there. You've put them in mineral buckets, but they are actually planted in the soil.
They are. The bottoms are cut out and then they're stuck down in the soil. And the main reason I do it is out here, like you can tell, the wind blows. It's Oklahoma. The wind blows. So I use it for protection mainly when they're little, when the plants are small. This weekend the plan is, if we can do it before the rain, to get cages put on them and pull the tubs and go ahead and get them caged up and then get them mulched and ready for summer. But mainly it's for protection, and I was lucky enough to get the mineral tubs with lids. And during the early spring when I put these in, because these went in on March 14th also, so they went through the cold weather, the cold snap in April. All of my plants did.
Okay.
Of course, they're getting a little big for it now, but you can just pop that lid and put the brick on it, and you have a mini greenhouse, so it protects them from cold weather and hail. I've used it to be hail protection. Thunderstorm, they're saying hail's coming, and I'll run out and grab all the lids and put them on top of it to protect it.
It's not for long-term growing greenhouse, but it gives it through that evening hours or
yeah, it gets it through the frost or the hailstorm.
That's a really great idea.
And a lot of the times in the dark, I'll come out because I know it's supposed to get warm enough that they don't need to be in the greenhouse through the day. So, you know, before I go to work in the morning, before daylight, I'll come out and pull them off.
Well, Andrea, I know you do a lot of cooking as well, and tell me a little bit, though, why you got into gardening and what you do then with all of this. You mentioned that you were going to freeze some of your produce so that you can continue. I know you do some canning as well, but is that why you garden, or how did you get started? We've
always had a garden. Some of my younger memories are with my mom and dad, my grandpa and Granny Hooker. They always had a huge garden, and we would always, there's a big tree that was outside of their house, and I remember we'd pick all the corn, and everybody would sit around, the aunts and all the kids would sit around, and we'd shuck corn under the trees. So, we grew up. I swore I'd never grow a potato again after one year. He planted an acre terrace in potatoes, and we got to, pick all of those up and put them in the storage. So a lot of
potatoes.
Yeah, a lot of potatoes. So us kids were like, no, I don't even want to do potatoes. But so we've always, always had a garden when we were younger, and then this has been our garden spot here for a long, long time. In the 80s, it was pig pens actually was here, and then my dad decided that he wanted a garden. So and his parents also always had a garden so just kind of comes in the family.
Right.
And then when Dad passed away in 2013, I told Mom, I said, well, I'll take over the garden. So I took over the garden, and here we are. And so I do can a lot. We did a lot of freezing last summer, and we did a lot of pickles, and we did some squash relish and used up the squash, and that turned out really well. So I do can, but like I said, we froze a lot last year, just because it was a little bit easier, and some things freeze a little better than other things do. So we used the cabbage that we froze last year all through the winter in soups and stews, and even steamed some of it, because we cut it in wedges and blanch it and then freeze it, so it's in big chunks. So and then broccoli, of course, we have a vacuum seal, and we blanch it and vacuum seal and put it in the freezer.
So you're able to eat the garden goods all winter long that way.
All winter long, and the things that don't keep or can well, we supply as we call it, the farm hood. I have lots of little ladies here and neighbors, and so they, we deliver to their porches, and that's kind of Mom's job. She'll say, okay, we need to get rid of some of this. And I said, well, okay, go on delivery. So she'd take it to the ladies. We got some ladies in town. I take it to work and just kind of put it on a table and say, it's yours,
Well, your garden is beautiful and obviously very productive. So I imagine that all of your friends appreciate your talent and your green thumb as well.
They do, and sometimes it's, okay, we're locking the door because we don't want any more. But yeah, they really do. They enjoy getting it, and especially the older neighbors that we have that can't do it anymore, and they used to garden, so
right.
they really enjoy getting the fresh produce and things. So.
Well, thank you for sharing your garden with us.
Well, you're very welcome.
Back in February, we did some pruning on our espalier pear trees, and now that it's May and we're getting a new flush of growth this spring, it's time to reevaluate some of our pruning that we're doing. So you can see we've got a lot of different water sprouts that are shooting straight up off of our cordons. Now we're going to mess with those a little bit later. The first thing that we want to focus on is our primary leader here. If you remember, some of these were a little misshapen and stuff, and so we chopped them back by taking a heading cut right there. And by doing that, we've got other buds that have now pushed out. So we've got several new little branches that are coming out. The reason why we are looking at this time of year is because these little branches are still very supple. And so as we start to look at training this next cordon that's going to grow on our wire here, we can easily move these and tie them down. So we're going to look at which ones we want to do that. Now there's one that's kind of in the way of us filming here, so I'm going to go ahead and take this one out of the way here. You can see it actually is growing down lower off this center leader here, so I'm just going to snip that one off to get it out of the way so we can see what we're doing here. This one, that's the lower one here, what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull this one down. You can see it's flexible. So I'm going to tie it a little bit closer to the base using these little rubber ties. And that gives us a nice tight anchor to pull that down. We probably should go ahead and anchor it again over here just to really secure it better. So as it goes through this season, this bark on this is going to harden and really solidify and allow us to develop that cordon. So once we have that side done, then it's time to look at the other side. Now we have a couple of options here. We have this one that's pretty small, and as you can see, I can pull that one down and could tie it. I'm a little concerned with how weak and established it is with the stem. If you can see, as I pull it down, it sort of is breaking a little bit there. So I'd rather not use that one just because of how weak that connection is. Instead, I'm going to pull this one down behind there. You can see I can easily pull that one down. It's pretty solid as far as the connection and the crotch there on the main trunk of the tree. So we're going to go ahead and again tie this one down. And go ahead, as we're training it, you want to make sure to tie it down maybe more than what you would have to later on. Once this is sort of hardened, we can take a couple of these off, or at least one of them off, so that it's not tied up so much. At this point, we're going to look now at the next step. So we're going to go ahead and remove this one because we've decided we're not going to use that one. And here we only have one other option. We're trying to train it to go up to the next level, and so because we cut this one, we also need to establish a new leader. So this will be our new leader. So we're going to go ahead and let it grow. If it's tall enough, you can tie it. I'm not too concerned about it. It's obviously going to grow straight up, and so we can anchor it at another point. Now this is what we will prune or head back next February in order to get more sprouts growing, and then again train these cordons here. Now it's time to look at the rest of this plant. Again, I mentioned that we've got several water sprouts growing up from some of the other cordons, for example, right here. So at this point, we want to make sure that we're keeping that design, which is having these horizontal cordons growing out. And so we're going to go ahead and prune some of these back as well. Basically, anything that is longer than just a few inches, we're going to go ahead and take them back. And be careful, there's some that are right there at the center too. So we'll go ahead and snip that back as well. You can see here's a couple more. We do have some that are just a few inches tall, and those aren't water sprouts. Those are good branches, and we're going to leave those. But we're going to go ahead and remove some of these longer ones here so that we can maintain our horizontal cordons. So you can see now we've got our second level done, and we're going to work our way down to this level, our very first level, and go ahead and prune some of those out as well. You also want to make sure you're following along your cordons, and as they continue to grow, if you want to continue to allow your cordon to grow, you're going to need to tie it down. You can see here we've got this one, and we're going to tie it so that it maintains that horizontal growth. But again, we've got another water sucker here, water sprout, so we're going to go ahead and trim that one off as well. So you can see we've got a nice horizontal growth at this point. The nice thing about espaliers is while they do take some training, the bulk of that training is done in the springtime, either when it's dormant and then also when you've got this young, supple vegetative growth later on in the springtime. Like any plant, you need to check on it throughout the season, but for the most part, we've got our espaliers trained for the season.
Today we're going to use iceberg lettuce, and I know a lot of people think that that is the polyester of lettuce now, but there is a lot more nutrition here than most of us imagine. So I'm going to start with this one. The other different thing about this particular iceberg lettuce recipe is that it's cooked. So I'm going to start heating up a little bit of vegetable oil. I've got 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, olive oil to be more precise if you choose, and then a shallot that I've sliced really thin. We're going to put those together and let them come up and sizzle a little bit for about 2 minutes. And while that's getting ready to work, I'm going to go ahead and start talking to you a little bit more about the lettuce. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to cut it in quarters, and I want to make sure. Now, normally when I use iceberg lettuce, I either trim a little bit around the base or I whack it and the core comes out. But I want the core there because I'm going to cut this into quarters, and I want it to be held in quarters, and the core is going to do that for us, and it's going to soften up nicely as it cooks as well. So I've trimmed off the bottom to give me a flat surface to cut with, and this one doesn't have a whole lot of core, so we're just going to work with what we have, and then just cut it into quarters, and we're going to put these into the pan after the shallot and the oil have cooked for a little bit. I mentioned that the nutritional value here is not what most people think. The amount of iceberg lettuce that is consumed every year now is about equal the amount of romaine. Romaine tends to cost a little bit more, and it keeps well, but so does iceberg lettuce. Iceberg lettuce of the lettuces is going to be the one that's going to keep the best for you if you wash it and then wrap it well in paper toweling so it can dry off, and then put it in plastic. It'll keep several days for you. And that's probably the reason that it hasn't dropped as much as some people think it should, because they think there's no nutrition there. Why is anybody eating it? But it gives you a nice crunch, it's got a nice flavor, and it doesn't spoil as quickly. So if your income is limited, you may be hesitant to buy produce that's going to spoil in a day or two like some of the leaf lettuces do. They don't last very long. So iceberg lettuce becomes a very good choice for those. Also holds up under heat a little better, so if you're doing something like a taco, it'll stay crisp, or on a hamburger, it'll stay crisp longer than other lettuces will. And as I mentioned, the nutritional value is not that much different than what you find in the others. The story is that there's nothing here, there's no reason to eat this. It is higher in water, hence it may be a little bit less than some of the other things than you might think. But it is still a nutritious food. The vitamin A and vitamin C may be a little bit higher in romaine, but a lot of the other things are really, really close to the same. So when this gets ready, we're going to put these in the pan, leave them in the pan. We're going to put them on a cut side down, and we'll leave them that way for about undisturbed for about 2 minutes, well, 5 minutes, and then we're going to turn them over and cook them a little bit with some other ingredients. So first thing is going to take 2 minutes. These are going to go in cut side down, and they're going to stay undisturbed for about 5 minutes so we can kind of caramelize the edges a little bit. All right, at this point, I'm just going to turn it on its other side and let it continue to cook on that side. I don't know how well you can see down into the pan, but we've got some caramelization going on the side that's been down there. This is not going to happen so much on this other side because we're going to add some liquid to it, so it's going to have more than just the fat to work with, and so it's not going to get that same dark color going on. So I've got 2/3 of a cup of low sodium vegetable broth. You could use any kind of broth that you happen to have. We're just mostly using that to make a little bit of a sauce, but mostly it's going to turn into steam and help cook it a little bit. And then I've got 1.5 to 2 cups of cannellini beans. Again, if you don't have cannellini beans, you could use another type as well. These were canned, just rinsed and drained, but you could cook them yourself. And then 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. Trying to spread it around a little bit because it's hard to stir later on and maintain the shape of the lettuce. And the same amount of kosher salt. All right, now we're going to put the lid on this and let the whole thing cook, bring it up to a boil and reduce the heat to low and let it cook for about 15 minutes. The lettuce is still going to hold a fair amount of shape. It's going to be different than fresh lettuce, so I hope you have some sense of adventure when you try this one. Again, put a lid on it, 15 minutes. Okay, you can see it's held its shape fairly well, and basically it's ready to go now. We've made a degree of sauce here. I'm going to sprinkle about a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice over the top to kind of perk it up a little bit, and then that's it. Let me shut that off. And then this just gets served with the beans and a little bit of the sauce. And it's just a different kind of green if you're vegetarian and you've used a vegetable stock with this. This can become a meal because you do have the protein source there as well. But it's just really, really good. A different way to use iceberg lettuce. And something that I hope you'll all give a try for. It's called iceberg lettuce with cannellini beans. For Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.
There are a lot of great horticulture activities this time of year. Be sure and consider some of these events in the weeks ahead. For the next couple of weeks, we will not air on the main OETA channel, but you can continue to see Best of Oklahoma Gardening shows on the OETA World channel. To find out more information about show topics as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure to visit our website at oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussion on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. Tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater gem. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, and Tulsa Garden Club.